I'd like to go into the update, which is update number 963. And we just heard about Mr. Messier. He also wrote the editorial, Where's the Goalpost? And I'd just like to read one paragraph from the editorial. He's saying the truth is we don't know when all the end-time events are going to be fulfilled. In fact, it might not be in my lifetime, as I am getting close to 80. There are quite a few of us in our late 70s and early 80s. Does that mean we throw in the towel and give up? No. We push on till the end. We endeavor to persevere till the task we have been given individually is complete. Since whether we seek Christ's return or we die before his return, if we remain faithful to the end, our reward of eternal life is sealed. And of course, he has a lot more to say in the editorial, but I felt I would want to quote this paragraph to you. Now, the current events talk about efforts in Europe and elsewhere to create a COVID passport, and then we speak on Germany's dissatisfaction with Angela Merkel's performance regarding the coronavirus crisis. I'd like to pause here and read an article which I have kind of prepared already for the next update to show you how dissatisfied the Germans are. And when the Germans are dissatisfied, you know what could happen. Bild Online wrote on March 5. At first, there were too few masks, then too little vaccine, and now we are dawdling with the quick tests. Now even Der Spiegel just boiled over. It's enough, Mr. Spahn, was a headline of an article in the Hamburg News magazine, and the author continued, actually 2 resignations are due. Whom does Der Spiegel author Dirk Courbouyeveit mean in his editorial? Chancellor Angela Merkel and Health Minister Jens Spahn. The main responsibility lies with the Chancellor, the article says. Merkel's overall balance sheet as Chancellor is spoiled. However, Jens Spahn's situation is even worse, because as Health Minister, he is also responsible for the debacle. In the case of Merkel, her resignation would lead to a political crisis in the middle of the pandemic, and because of the imminent general election, there would probably be no stable government until the end of the year. That doesn't make the situation any better. The Spiegel says, for the Minister of Health, however, this pragmatic political objection doesn't apply. Spahn no longer belongs in this office. It also says that the crisis policy of the federal and state governments has become a farce. Is that really Germany? The author asks in astonishment, looking at the government's crisis management. Organizing, doing business intelligently, that was always considered a strength of the Germans. And now almost nothing works smoothly, of all things in the pandemic, in the struggle for life and death. What's going on here? And then his diagnosis. Germany, it is to be said, is currently being ruled terribly bad by the federal chancellor, by the group of prime ministers, and by some ministers, namely Health Minister Jens Spahn. That must have consequences. So the interesting thing is, every time, when you look at the history of Germany, every time Germans are dissatisfied with the current government, and they have been dissatisfied quite a bit, changes will take place. And of course we know, don't we, that ultimately a unified Europe consisting of 10 nations or groups of nations will come together. We call it the core Europe. We call it the Europe with 2 speeds. Under, it could either be a German or an Austrian leader. And this is going to be the beast, talked about in the book of Revelation. It's going to be a German or an Austrian. So people at this point are looking in all the different wrong directions. Here's an article by Express, which also was coming to my attention today, even though it was published already on March 2. It says Emmanuel Macron might have found a replacement for Angela Merkel in Mario Draghi as the new Italian prime minister, seeing eye to eye with the French leader on EU defense and security. And then it goes on to say that Merkel and Macron will have to deal with an influential voice whose competence in economic and monetary matters dwarfs theirs, to say the least, and whose international aura and prestige at least equals their own. So apparently the idea is like, oh, it could be then Macron leading Europe, maybe with the help of Italian Prime Minister Mario Draghi, who is of course the one who saved the euro, as you probably have heard. Neither one is the one. And so we just got to keep watching to see where this is all leading. I also would like to remind you that there are scriptures in the book of Revelation to the effect that not only the Roman Empire received a deadly wound and was then healed, and the revivals of the ancient Roman Empire in Europe took place, also the last leader of that revived Roman Empire apparently will receive a wound. It could be a political defeat, which then will be healed. And it even says the world will be astonished when that happens. So therefore, these are the kind of things we are supposed to watch. Going back to the current events and the introduction to it, we go on to say that we address America's airstrike against Syria and the reaction of Republicans and Democrats, with Ron Paul calling it an impeachable offense. And we point out America's reluctance to sanction Saudi Arabia's crown prince over the murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi due to political expedience. We also warn of coming hyperinflation. We report on Donald Trump's comeback. We address the US Supreme Court's final decision regarding indoor religious services in California. We speak on a proposed law in Denmark, which would restrict religious liberties and freedoms. Now you may say, well, that's Denmark. Well, we have members in Denmark. So all of these things do have a bearing for all of us. We then speak on the discussion pertaining to Europe, with or without NATO, and Israel's strong objection to an Iran deal propagated by Europe and the United States. And I want to stop right here. In our articles on the current events, we quote Benjamin Netanyahu from the Times of Israel, dated February 26, saying this. Netanyahu on Thursday said he was told, or he has told Biden, that he will do whatever it takes to prevent a nuclear-armed Iran, regardless of whether Washington re-enters a nuclear deal with the Islamic Republic. There is a regime whose flagship goal is to destroy us. I will do everything I can, everything in my power, to prevent it from attaining nuclear weapons, he said. Now, today, more has been revealed. In an article by Newsmax, which was actually published on March 4, we say this, and listen carefully. Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu told supporters he would stand against the entire world to stop the Iran nuclear deal. Netanyahu's comments were a change for the Prime Minister, who had been careful in discussing the nuclear pact. President Donald Trump withdrew the US from the nuclear deal in 2018. The international reality has changed, said Netanyahu, undoubtedly referring to Biden having replaced Trump. There is an intention to go back to this dangerous deal. I am the only one who will stand against the entire world. You know what? He may be absolutely correct. What's going to happen? He has made it very clear he will use not just words, he will use actions. He will use maybe his war machine, if he feels that it's necessary to do something. It goes on to say in the article that France, Germany, and the United Kingdom have backed off a plan to censure Iran for not cooperating with the International Atomic Energy Agency. Iran says, well, if you do that, we don't talk anymore. Oh, no, we want to talk, so we are not going to criticize you. Europe has responded. Now, US knows exactly what's going on. The Jerusalem Post wrote today on March 5? whatever it is, on March 5, they wrote, the Biden administration issued a warning this week to its allies in the Middle East not to oppose US policies, not to seek military solutions to the region's problems. We do not believe that military force is the answer to the region's challenges, and we will not give our partners in the Middle East a blank check to pursue policies at odds with American interests and values, it said in the document posted on the White House website that outlined its global strategic interests. Now again, they are concerned that Israel will do it all alone, and Israel has said, we are going to do it all alone. We are not going to allow Iran to have nuclear weapons. And quite frankly, looking at this realistically, I believe that this is what would happen if Netanyahu feels, of course he has to be re-elected too, if he feels that that is a must. So again, we need to watch and to observe, because the Bible also makes very clear statements about the fact that ultimately even America and the United Kingdom will turn against Israel. Everybody will against everybody else. And we also read about a wound Israel will receive. It looks like a military defeat, apparently before the Great Tribulation even starts. So anyway, things to just keep in mind. Going back to the update, we also say in here that we are talking about the refusal of the Palestinian Authority to grant Israel any access to the Al-Aqsa Mosque. The Al-Aqsa Mosque, if you probably have noticed, is becoming more and more an issue in the news. And they will not allow Israel to have any access to it under any circumstances. And then we're talking about Russia's persecution of its dissidents. We speak on Pope Francis' comments regarding the flood. I mentioned something about that in a moment. We speak about Pope Emeritus Benedict's concerns about Joe Biden. As you will recall, that was a prior pope. He resigned. His name was originally Cardinal Ratzinger. He became Pope Benedict. He resigned and was replaced by Pope Francis, but he's still around. Very old, still around. Still has apparently quite an influence in the conservative group within the Catholic Church. And we also talk about the late or missing US mail. If you have wondered why you don't get any mail, or why the mail is so terribly late, well, it's being explained here as to what's happening. And then, of course, we talk about the nonsense of gender neutrality regarding toys for boys and girls. And we report on the largest ever cocaine bust in Europe. And of course, if that had gone through, you can imagine, or we can imagine actually, the terrible health problems that would have caused for those who would have bought that stuff. So these are basically articles I had liked to summarize. There's another one I'd like to bring to your attention. Actually, this was an article which was published, let's see now, in the Washington Times, I believe on March 4. And it talks about an effort by the left-wing media to destroy the history of the United States. I mean, you have been observing this. They, try to get rid of statues of even President Washington, President Lincoln, and others. They are trying to rename airports and college buildings because they have the names they don't like to have anymore. And so now, of course, it also talks about other things they are trying to do, including prohibiting books to be published. And the author writes here, how can Mark Twain's The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn survive, or Laura Ingalls Wilder's Little House on the Prairie series, or J.M. Barney's Peter Pan, each with their own set of perceived and real stereotypes? Even Ronald Dahl's original Charlie and the Chocolate Factory has inspired criticism over the depiction of the Oompa Loompas as jungle dwellers. Let's not forget Margaret Mitchell's Gone with the Wind, in all its slavery glory, of course he's speaking facetiously here, or Charles Dickens' Oliver Twist, or Lynn Red Banks, The Indian in the Cupboard, in all its, the title speaks volumes on that one. The list is endless. The list can be endless. Even the Bible speaks on the enslavement of various peoples. And that's the key here. Pretty soon, are we still allowed to preach what the Bible says? Are we still allowed preaching about homosexuality? That homosexuality is an abomination in the eyes of God. It's being condemned, both in the Old and in the New Testament. In certain countries, that's already not allowed anymore. That's hate speech. Pretty soon, maybe they are going to produce a Bible where they're taking certain scriptures out. Who knows? I mean, they also want to talk about God as being a she or an it. And so the article goes on to say, as we turn off all the offensive to our ears in some sort of futile attempt to whitewash or erase not just history, but fancy and fiction and flights of imaginations. Are we doing that? And then it goes on to say this is about the shape of censorship, things to come. It's about a growing acceptance of blotting out all offenses in the hope that ignoring offenses means the offenses don't occur. In fact, that they didn't occur. That's erasing history. That's a living lie. Word is next up that Baum's Wizard of Oz series will be banned. Then he says, let the burning begin. The trouble, of course, will be to know the exact point to extinguish the fire. You know, I have lots of books at home which were all prohibited, burned in Nazi Germany. And of course, I don't have those books which were burned, right? But I have copies of those which were burned, including books like The Parent Trap by Erich Kästner. You probably may not know the name Erich Kästner, but you've probably seen the movie, The Parent Trap. This was all burned because the Nazis didn't like it for whatever reason. And then when the Russians came, more books were burned because they didn't like certain books for their rationale. Book burning is a terrible thing because you suppress alternate thoughts, or not the kind of thoughts which the mainstream media wants to propagate, whatever the leadership might be. So we got to be aware of this. I mean, pretty soon religious books will be banned. I can see that very clearly. It's already happening. And so this is a sign of the times. So just be aware of what is going on. Not just in the United States, it's also going on in other parts in the world. Now let's talk a little bit about the Q&A, which was written by Mr. Gale. And he talks about understanding the wording of some church hymns. Now you might have noticed which three hymns we sang this morning. It was hymn 78, it was hymn 89, and it was hymn on pages 112, 113. And it just so happens, quote unquote, of course I'm again being facetious, that these are the three hymns Mr. Gale is writing about in his Q&A. Hymn 78 is entitled, He Shall Reign Forevermore. It's taken from Psalm 102. In the New King James Bible, the subheading of the psalm is that it is a prayer of the afflicted when he is overwhelmed and pours out his complaints to the Lord. And then he goes through some of these statements and explains what it means. It says, it's like a melancholy sparrow, like a pelican alone. What does it mean? You see, so then he is explaining that. The second hymn was the one, just wait a minute, I went too far, was number 89, O give thanks unto our God. And then in verse 3 it says, in the psalm, all nations compassed me about, compassed me like bees. What does that mean? Why are they referring to bees? And so he is talking about that. And then the third one was, of course, hymn 112, 113, Praise You the Lord. This hymn was adopted from Psalm 148, subheaded in the King James Bible as Praise to the Lord from creation. And then, he's talking about what does it mean, the mountains give praise to God and the stars and all of that. So the point he is making, a very good point, is when we sing those hymns, let's also very deeply concentrate on the words. What are we singing? What does it mean? And if we have questions about it, well, we can always do some more research and get a better and deeper understanding of the hymns. And of course, they're based on the Psalms. And so we have, in this Q&A, only listed 3, but we have over 100 hymns in our English hymnal, which of course is the one which was originally published by Mr. Armstrong. and of course not the very first one, but the one we are using. And so again, it was a good admonition, I thought, to think about that more deeply. I mean, I have to say, when I was reading the statement about, encompassing me like bees, I didn't quite originally, right away, have the answer on that one either. So it was very interesting to read the explanation. When it comes to the work section, we have a new standing watch out. Pope warns of a worldwide flood. And here's a summary. In referring to the story of the great flood in the Bible, Pope Francis said that humanity is facing another great deluge due to a rise in temperature and the melting of glaciers. He continued that the biblical flood, which destroyed the world except for Noah, may have been a myth. What does the Bible say about Noah's flood and the possibility of another deluge in our time? So, and of course, the standing watch goes into the fact that the flood under Noah was not a myth, it was factual, and it was not just a local flood either, it was a worldwide flood, destroying everything on this earth except for those in the ark. And then we also point out that God has made a promise. There's never going to be another deluge, another worldwide flood on the earth. So the Pope is wrong on both counts. Then we are talking about the fact that our new booklet, Are Jews and Christians at Odds with Jesus Christ, is nearing completion. So we should have that in Mrs. Bruno's hands pretty soon, and then we can get it to the printer. And so hopefully we'll have it done, well, I don't want to be too, I don't want to say optimistic, but I would say we'll have it definitely done next month. All right, so then the new German sermon, the new German sermonette, German sermon given by me, the sermonette given by Michael Link, they have been posted on the web. The German sermonette from last Sabbath by Daniel Blasinger has been posted. Last Sabbath sermonette by Michael Link has been posted. The News and Prophecy from last week has been posted. The Parallels with Ancient Israelites sermon by Kalen Mitchell has been posted. So a lot of posting has been going on. And again, thanks to all of you who are participating in this. The new articles, which I'm putting together right now for the current events, also have some interesting information regarding a fight going on right now between the EU and the US and the UK. Nothing is really surprising there. The royal family in Britain being in absolute turmoil. They are saying it has never been as bad since Princess Diana. And of course, Russia's publications right now are being attacked in Germany for numerous reasons. And then there's an article in there already about the COVID-19 lockdowns and what result that has for wild animals. The Bible has a lot to say about wild animals, and that due to wild animals, many people will die. We're already seeing the beginning of that as well.